So, Joe McCabe at AutoForecast Solutions. I'm excited today for a podcast to share with you the industry insight we have to share with our community and our customers. Today, myself and Sam Fiorani, who runs our global vehicle production team, are just going to talk about industry and hopefully give you some insightful information that we can help you with your decision-making process. So, Sam, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Joe. Well, I'm looking forward to talking about the industry with you.
Excellent. Sam, you run the forecasting on a global basis. We do put out a forecast every single month, and this whole COVID issue, actually, we've been tracking on a daily basis that impact for our customers. It's been really some interesting times right this second. I don't think we've ever been busier in this industry, but can you sort of speak to the ideas of what's driving our short-term and long-term outlooks and, go with some of those ideas?
Sure. We're trying to figure out when we can get back to the industry. When does the market come back? When does production restart? And with all the issues that we're having with COVID inside of factories and workers contaminating their own areas and slowing production back down, it becomes an issue of restarting every factory. So all these factories are purposefully starting slow for the safety of the workers. And we hope to get everything back to normal within a year or so, but it's going to take a long time because we have to deal with the new norms of finding out how close you can be to other workers, and when you do cross paths, making sure that you're as safe as possible as you're doing that. It's going to take a while to ramp up to speed on doing all that thing.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember when we were doing this back in 2009, and we were thinking this is the new bottom. And since then, when we present all this stuff, you and I go to conferences, we always talk about if we learn, right? If we can learn from what they happened back then. There was a couple audiences that came out of it. There was those that said, oh no, this is the bottom. I need to look at that short term and how I'm going to survive tomorrow. And there's those that said, look, I have to be a long-term viable company. And the only way to do that is, I have to look at short term, but I have to keep my eye on the prize, which is the long-term success, how I'm going to remain competitive. Maybe my competitiveness in the future is not the same strategy I'm using today. We have all these moving parts with this idea of a global consolidation of platforms we're telling people. We have electrification, that there's a bunch of different audiences in that space going, yes, it's going to be successful. No, it's going to be slow, or somewhere in between. And, when we talk to people, and I've been doing this recently on my calls this week, I say about this idea of disruption. There's good disruption and there's bad disruption. There's disruption because someone thinks of something of an innovative space, redefines a space in the industry and says, wow, that's something we should all look to attain. And there's this disruption from pandemics and catastrophes. Back in 2008 and 2009, it was financially based. This is a health issue that is the primary, but secondary is financially based. So it could be even a doubly bad as it was back then. So we're really trying to tell people, short-term viability is important in surviving, but how do you set a certain pace where you can survive and you can sort of take it to the next level? You know how we're doing this. Back in January, we were looking at North America outlook at 16.5 million units. We're coming into a strong year. And then this pandemic hits, and we lowered our forecast to 12.1 million this past month because we are on a wait and see basis. We got April, which is a big fat zero in the industry. We got May, which came in a lot lower from production standpoint because it was a lot of uncertainty. How do we get people back safely? How do we improve the optics that we're not going to have this idea of a relapse? And to me, that idea of a relapse is a real concern. What are your thoughts on that part too?
Well, you mentioned the good and the bad of uncertainty and change in the industry. This is absolutely a bad change because a lot of people are harmed by it, and we've had a lot of fatalities from this pandemic. But from an industrial perspective, you can learn from this. You can make it a better thing. When we had the Great Recession 10 years ago, all these companies stepped up and cleaned up their act. They right-sized their companies. They downsized plants, took out vehicles that were not profitable.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another chance to do just that, and right size your product portfolio, right size the markets you're in, and potentially downsize your plants when they're not running at capacity.
Yeah, that's spot on. When we're talking to people, they're asking the question, what do I do? And the short answer is, the good news, if there is good news, is everyone is in the same boat. There's not some supplier setup that is really excelling and those that are really suffering. Everyone's sort of suffering. And it really sheds light on the importance of the whole supply chain. The last several years, the vehicle manufacturers, they basically, the reliance they put on the supply chain is so great that when something like this happens, it really is a wait and see about how things are going to restart. I mean, just last month where we had Lear being a just-in-time supplier to Ford, having to shut Ford down temporarily because their just-in-time supply was disrupted. And you talk about a tier one that has to that goes down to a tier two and tier three. We're telling people this is about stakeholders. This isn't just about people that build vehicles and build parts. This is everyone in the whole chain. That chain goes from the government helping people through these painful situations, down the manufacturer, down the suppliers, down the secondary businesses that support those industries, and all the way down to the demand cycle, the consumer. And if any one of those things we're telling people doesn't move properly or move sideways, the whole thing shifts. So we get that question all the time, and you've been getting it too, right? Where's the demand? Where's the demand? The question is, good question. If the idea of a potential for a relapse occurs, people are going to play it safe. And playing it safe means they're not going to put risk in their decision-making process, or they may want to wait a little longer. And every time they wait, that's going to push that issue where you're not moving inventory. And if you can't move inventory, well, then the manufacturers who want to build new product can't get the new product on the lot. So this idea of this shift that we're constantly seeing is really this daily issue. Not to mention the fact that if you believe, or if anyone believes there is an issue of a recap of this happening, then this idea of turning your lights on and off is going to accelerate this disruption to the point where like you said, you're going to have attrition, you're going to have consolidation, you're going to have suppliers that say, I just can't weather this storm again. So we almost have to get to a point of figure it out. Get to the point where you have to change your way of thinking to get past and through this, because there is going to be light at the end of that tunnel. The problem is no one knows how long that tunnel is. And, we are looking at our 8-year outlook, but, refresh our audience about where we really think the recovery is going to be and where we stand on that position.
Well, the recovery will take time. It will absolutely take time. And it's easy to lose an economy. It's really difficult to come back from it. The whole supply and demand thing is a chicken and the egg thing, where if you don't have people with jobs, they can't buy anything. And if they can't buy anything, the products aren't made. And if the products aren't made, people aren't hired. So it's a vicious circle, and it just takes a lot of time to get back into alignment. And this is going to take us years to get back to where we were just last year. Mm-hmm. The growth of this industry is going to be slow, and it hopefully will be gradual, that we can continue to grow even 4 or 5 years out, instead of having everything come back and over supply the market and then just have the market have to crater again at that point. We're hoping that we can get everybody back to work sooner rather than later. We can get the products back out there. We can get the dealerships up and running. We can get the suppliers running to provide all the parts that we need for all these things. And like you said, all the tiers have to work together. So we have to get the tier one supplying to the manufacturer, and the tier two supplying to the ones, and everybody up and down the line rolling in. We had an issue just recently where the U.S. manufacturers were starting to roll out, but they weren't getting enough parts from Mexico that was still under quarantine. So we have to get Mexico up and running. This is an interconnected world. So if one part of the puzzle doesn't fit, then we're going to need to get that puzzle piece in place before we can move on to the next one.
Yeah, I agree. When we're asked the question of what should we do when we come out of this thing, I say hedge your bets, right? The hedge your bets is you build where you sell. I think you're going to have a lot more vehicle manufacturers that say if this happens in the future, borders will be shut down, and therefore I need a more local supply. So my idea of expanding my just-in-time suppliers, or sort of forcing my suppliers, so to speak, into saying you have to be a little closer. So should this happen, you need to be within a jurisdiction or two that will not be turned off while we're turned on for manufacturing. I think it's going to change the real landscape of the supplier community in the future. I think we're going to see the fact that more manufacturers are going to say, wait a second, I have to now look at a secondary and tertiary supply line just in case supplier A doesn't make it. And then when the supplier's looking at it going, okay, if there's a cyclicality in the industry, which we know there always is, but this is a monster bottom, that how do I look at better opportunity to turn on my PPE production? How do I look into non-automotive manufacturing? How do I sort of build in a layer of protection in industries that may be insulated when a pandemic occurs? We tell every supplier. Unfortunately, some suppliers are so focused on a niche, they don't have the opportunity to do that. And they're always working on razor thin margins anyway. It's difficult to invest in the what if scenario. So it puts a lot of reliance on the tier ones now to be the new parent of the whole supply chain, to get it done and organize it for the vehicle manufacturers. And I think it's what's going to be a major shift. Just in the last 10 years, the big push was globalization of platforms, which is great. Commonality of parts, and everyone, more volume equals better deals. But now if it's a common part and the whole thing's turned upside down, that could be 10 million units that's disrupted. I mean, our top line right this second globally is just over 72 million units of production in 2020. We haven't seen that in over a decade. But I agree with you. I don't think we're going to have this idea where, hey, we're all going to wake up one day and everything's going to be back to normal. I think our new normal is going to be an interesting reset. I mean, I know our current outlook for North America, we never top 17 million units in our 8-year forecast right now. I think it's going to be a point where you build a product that's sold in that market. If you need to move it out and offshore to a market that's going to produce it better or help your business, and it still follows within your ability to make revenue and profitability, you're going to see more and more of that. So I think we're going to have this reset, and you're going to see some plants that get turned off from here. You're going to see some portfolio shifts that occur. And, we are still at the tip of the spear understanding how we're going to get through this. But right now we are definitely interesting times in that perspective. And we're really trying to figure out who the worst case is saying the winners and the losers, right? We don't want to use those classifications, right? But who will be the winner and the loser of this whole thing? Who is going to benefit and who is going to really be behind the leader and potentially not be able to weather the storm? Any thoughts on that side?
Yeah, well, you have the problem with the winners and losers with any issue in the industry, even when there aren't major issues to talk about. But the problem with your winners and your losers is that it depends on which tack you take. If you take the idea of building all your parts where you sell, well, now we have to deal with higher cost of parts. Whereas if I can globally source my parts, I can pick and choose where it's most efficient to purchase that part from. But if I have to build them all locally, well, then suddenly some of those parts are going to be more expensive because this isn't the perfect region to build that part. On the other hand, if I go global, then I open myself to an issue like this pandemic where I have to deal with closed borders, and then I have to find a locally sourced part temporarily or long term to continue building after that point. So it becomes a double-edged sword as you decide where you're going to be long term as a winner or a loser in this.
Yeah, I mean, that was the recent discussions we've had with some of our customers, is that when you deal with different jurisdictions, there is this hope that there's a loyalty, that if a manufacturer was provided some tax abatement or some incentive to come to that area, has a strong workforce, checks all the boxes in the, hey, this is a great place to do business, yet you can't build the right product, you don't have the right consumer in place, a business decision is going to overshadow, shareholders are going to overshadow everything. And you're going to see manufacturers say, we may have an award-winning plant, and we may have a great product and all that, but we are not profitable in what we're doing. We're not profitable in the chain we're using. So we are going to have to build this elsewhere or potentially shift our product. We saw that, unfortunately, we saw in Canada with Oshawa, right? Great plant. Oshawa's award-winning facility, but because that product was built at multiple facilities across North America, and because there was excess capacity, it made sense to build it in more centralized locations and shut that capacity down. Now, did it reflect on the fact that it had a fantastic workforce, an educated, strong workforce, a supporting government, multiple check boxes in the pro? Didn't necessarily affect their conversation at the end to shut that out. I think we're going to see more of that light bulb moment going, oh my God, we can't just presume someone's loyalty in the past is going to be a long-term loyalty in the future. So we got to keep the conversations open. We got to say, look, we see your sales are dropping this product. How can we help? Hey, as a government, how do we become hand in hand as a jurisdiction? How do we come hand in hand with you, manufacturer? Because we don't want to negotiate 4 years from now and then you use this as a, sorry, we love you. We love it. We love your market, but we have to leave because it just doesn't make a financial strong decision. And I think we're already seeing this shift of production that we've learned from the past, right? Look at plants that build, multiple plants that could build the same product, and see how that exposes each one of those plants now compete against each other. Look at this idea that people are looking at electrification, but even major CEOs and manufacturers going, this is a long-term play. Electrification is not going to be a light switch moment. It's going to live in a symbiotic relationship with its big IC engine brother at that point. And you have all these people rushing down this path of innovation for the sake of it. And it's sometimes going to be a dangerous path when people just don't have enough money to buy a normal, let's call it normal IC engine car versus pay a premium for an electrified vehicle. But it is going to be a future. The idea is when. So we're seeing those same questions that keep people up at night, and we're trying to lead them down a path. Where is your exposure? Where's your risk? Right? I still see, there's a risk at certain plants that say, yeah, we may be doing a plant that does it, but is this product have long-term viability? Is there a reason why we're the only ones doing it? Should it be something we get out of? We've seen major manufacturers say, hey, we're not going to build sports cars anymore. Great. The other sports car manufacturers now have a shining star, but is it? Will that market shift enough that doesn't justify the volumes? And, we're trying to stay on top of that, but it's been a really tricky issue when you deal with a market that's glacial, right? We all compete in a glacial market. This is automotive. Car decisions, building cars right now, or for the cars 4 years from now, are being told about today. It's tough to shift on that, to turn on that dime.
Yeah, I fully agree there. The issue comes up when you decide what market you're going to be in, whether it's a physical place to be or a physical product to be. You look at the mid-size sedan segment where Chrysler abandoned that years ago, and Ford is following, and Nissan is reducing their footprint. These are places where money is better spent somewhere else, and they've been deciding this over the last 10 years or more. General Motors now is looking at where to sell cars or build cars even, and so they abandoned Australia nearly a decade ago. They announced that they were leaving there. That Australian domino took out everybody else because you need the big players to support the suppliers. And then if you lose some suppliers, then you're going to lose the next manufacturer and the next manufacturer. And Australia wasn't a big enough market. Even though they had specific products for that market, they weren't a big enough player for them to support a whole industry. So now everybody's bringing their cars from China or Korea or the United States or Mexico instead of building them locally. Same thing could happen in, say, Indonesia, where GM is already looking that they don't need to be there. They've sold the plant. Somebody else will step up and take over the plant. But you need the major players so that the market remains there. It's just the decision they have to make now. And this being as good a time as any, because you can roll it into the pandemic and say, well, we had to look at our business case, and this is the excuse. The other excuse 10 years ago was bankruptcy. Well, we filed for bankruptcy so we can get rid of this brand or this model or that plant and abandon these markets. It worked. The timing worked out for them, and it makes it a better story to sell to the workers, to the stakeholders, to the suppliers. You just have to make these tough decisions when you make these tough decisions, and move on and make the company a better company.
So, Sam, you bring up a good point about this whole idea of a downsizing market. It's not just this North America issue. Again, this is a global economy we're playing in. What do we think is going to be the sales outlook, specifically North America, but how it sort of impacts on the impacted by the globe?
Well, we've got to, as I said before, we have to get everybody back working, everybody back shopping. We have to find a way for these vehicles to find homes. And if you're living under a stimulus, you're just going to make sure that you have food, roof, and healthcare. And so we need to make sure that everybody has jobs so that they can have disposable income and buy cars. So it's going to take a little bit of time to get back there. And we're looking at around 12.9 million units of vehicles sold in the United States, light vehicles sold in the United States this year, which is down from 17.1 last year. We had to turn this down because of the pandemic, but then we had to readjust it up when sales started coming back pretty strong. So we're hoping that people find jobs quickly. And if that happens, then we'll absolutely have more sales than expected. And we're always hoping for the best, but we have to give you a realistic outlook. And the realistic outlook at the moment is 12.9. That will lead into further growth next year as more people become employed, more disposable income out there, and we can get somewhere probably around 14.8 million units next year. Well, it'll be a rolling start to get us back to where we were at 17 million, but it's going to take us like 5 years to get to 17 million again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, again, we're coming back from, when we do our forecasting, everyone looks at, hey, trends. Trends are recently manufacturers have been really good about keeping their production numbers in line with the demand cycle, so they're not building at excess. But right now, as you said, as we're trying to move inventory off the lots, that's going to potentially give us a higher sales number that won't equate to a necessarily higher production number. I mean, right now we're in the 800,000 unit gap in terms of our sales outlook and our production outlook for North America. Our U.S. sales versus our North American production is usually a very tight number. And that's really going to shed some light of, hey, that's great news. And suppliers, that's nice, but doesn't necessarily help them, their revenue model, because they got to build a product on the newer stuff. And GM has to push their new trucks on the lots. And, Ford wants to stop delaying their Bronco and get that thing out because this is something critical to the portfolio. So it's interesting from that perspective of how we're having this divergence of that sales and production. Sometimes decisions are made in the wrong bucket because a lot of our customers are on the production side. They care about how am I going to produce that next part for that next vehicle. So I think that's critical. And that's something we're seeing all over the globe, right? That's not just going to be a North American phenomenon. And, when we look to the globe, we got to always look at China. We got to see that they were first in with this pandemic, which means they're first out. That gives them the opportunity to take advantage of growth and innovation and how it's going to answer to the global economy. People ask all the time, what's the landscape look in the future? The landscape looks in the future is, we think this idea of brand equity is becoming lost. People buy vehicles because it's something they like, because it's something a friend got. They're maybe not loyal GM or Ford or Chrysler through and through blood all their life. And that idea of the brand loyalty potentially shifting is going to shift people to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to look at that new vehicle. Everyone says, when are the Chinese coming? Or if they're coming. It's not if, it's when. Chinese manufacturers are going to come here very soon. And it's going to be a fact that it's going to be a competitive landscape. Just to bring us to a head, we could talk about the industry for hours. You and I talk about it for hours anyway when we're always building our forecast and deal with our customers. But, pandemic aside, if we really had to look at the things that are interesting nuggets and shifts in the market and, things that we're seeing that are running in parallel towards this reboot and this idea of we got to get back to some sort of level of norm. What are you seeing in the industry these days?
We've got a lot of companies that are looking to rebuild themselves to make sure that they take full advantage of the market when it comes back. And we've got companies like on the luxury end, you have Acura and Infiniti who are looking to recast themselves as this near luxury player. Acura is coming out with the new TLX, which is their new rebirth. This is their core car, and then they have a nice lineup of crossovers. They're going to have to expand the crossovers. The new TLX looks great, and so when we get it on the road and we see how they adapt with higher output V6, all-wheel drive, the Type S coming back, all these sportiness that Acura has been known for. Mm-hmm. Perhaps that can get them back into as a player in the near luxury market. On the other hand, we have Infiniti, who has been wallowing with excellent products, but when you're in the shadow of Lexus and you're in the shadow of BMW and trying to get out there, it takes a lot to establish a name. And Infiniti just has been having a tough time. And it doesn't help that Nissan itself, its parent company, is having a tough time. So rebuilding that brand into something that can sell to the mass market again. And then moving down line, you have companies like Mazda, who are building excellent products. They're just not selling as many as they should be selling. So by recasting that brand with the new CX-30, we have a new Mazda 6 coming out in about 2 years with potentially with rear-wheel drive and an inline six-cylinder, to recast that whole company as a potential entry-level BMW. It makes the brand appeal to new customers, and so we're hoping that those will set the companies apart and find some new buyers for their products.
Yeah, I have the QX60 Infiniti, and it's my second one, and I love it. But you're right. When I looked at the market, everyone else is refreshing their products, and it's the same body style in 2020 that it was in 17. I love the engine. I love the power. There's, it checked all the boxes, so I stuck with it. But if you see all the competition out there that's taken over, I think you're right. They need a sort of a revitalization of their brand and to really push that marquee a little more. There's a staleness that they got to get through. And then pile on pandemic, right, doesn't give them the opportunity to capitalize that. Hopefully they're going to come out of this thing with stronger product, like you said. But you're right. You look at products that are still in the passenger car segment. People are still, everyone says, no, it's all crossovers. There's still a market for passenger cars out there. More of the Asian brands and the European brands that people are buying in terms of that space. The Detroit 3 own the large SUVs, large trucks, and that's their bread and butter, obviously. But there's still a market for a sports car, and I think you're right about that assessment that they, this is not about just looking about funds, but how do we survive? How do we revitalize a product? Because we need that consumer when this thing gets turned on.
Absolutely, yeah, and we always discuss Tesla as being a sports car company that happens to have an electric product. When you talk about finding your niche, Tesla has definitely found that, and they've appealed to people who would have bought a sports car before, but now a sports car might seem too dirty, too ungreen for the market today. So right. If you can drive a Tesla, and the Tesla doesn't use any gas, but it still has all the performance of your previous Porsche or your previous AMG, it's going to appeal to these new customers and bring a whole new glow to the brand.
And good point on that. We're going to end on that topic. I mean, Sam, you hit in there. That's going to be our next one. The idea of electrification, the winners, the losers, the idea that there's two markets. There's a sports car market, and there's a utility-based market that serves a purpose in that space. Hey, that's a whole nother hour in its own, but I think that's something we're going to address next time. But I would ask everyone that hopefully you like what you hear and to sign up for our AFS podcasts. Send us an email at podcasts@autoforecastsolutions.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channels, our social media. And in fact, we're going to expand this in the future. We're going to start taking a more of a Q&A approach. Send in your questions. And those questions that we think are really good, we'll collect them and we'll basically put them out there and discuss those issues. But, we're here to help. This is not just about a forecasting company, a bunch of data. It's about how do we help decision-making processes? How do we help you really make your mark in the industry? And we hope you subscribe to our services, and we really look forward to this as one of many podcasts in the future. But I want to thank you, Sam, for all of your insight as always.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.